Hey everybody, I'm gonna get started. Hey, first ever Red Oak Breakout. This is fun. Joseph's gonna turn that air off because it's a little chilly in here, and never mind about the chili, but yes about the loud. Uh, so I really didn't know what to expect with everybody. Like if I thought I might be in here with one or two other people, or there could be a lot of people. I have no idea. So excited about that. First, this yeah. I didn't set these out. I'm sorry. But I had them. We have 20. So yeah, there's coffee back there as well if anybody wants to stay up all night. And then you would. Then Joseph has brought a bunch of resources that are specific to Bible study back there. That they're really just to check out if you want to take a picture of them or whatever. Just like they're just ideas for you to kind of go back and okay, that one looks cool, or thumb through or whatever. But just take a picture of them and if you don't mind, leave them there. But just so you can check them out. Here's what I thought we'd do tonight. I've taught sessions at camp about 8 different iterations on how to study the Bible, how to get the most out of Bible study, prayer and Bible reading, things like that. And really, I thought maybe we could use this like as a template, kind of start out talking about how to get the most out of Bible study that would kind of cover some general thoughts on Bible study and some general ways people go wrong. I know I've gone wrong in the past. And so maybe I'd use that as a template, and then we kind of open it up if you guys wanted to talk deeper in a more specific area. So maybe you've got more specific questions about commentaries versus study Bibles or, whatever it may be. But this might serve to, answer some general questions, get us thinking in the right direction. If I can talk for maybe 15, 20 minutes and then just kind of pause and have some question and might have some just discussion on, all right, what works for you in this area? Or anybody, seen this? And so, does that sound good? All right. Now, a lot of you guys are studying the Bible every single day, close to it. Like a lot of you guys have been in the game for a long time, been Christians for a while, been studying the Bible. And so, I've been a Christian since I was about 18. And, I've been trying to study the Bible, ever since I was that age. And I don't have it all figured out. And the thing about Bible study is it's so personalized, it's kind of like a diet, like an eating plan. What works for you? When me and Amy were first married, I was like, all right, I got to be the leader of the house. We're going to sit down in the living room and we're going to study the Bible together. And it was terrible. It was awful because her brain thinks exactly opposite of mine. And so I'd be like, all right, we're going to work through this passage and and she just was not connecting with it. And I was not connecting with it. It was terrible. But like everybody's going to have different tips and tricks because your brain works different than mine. And so I just want to talk in generalities. The big goal is just that we're studying every day. That's it. We open the word every day and just straight up read it. We win. That's winning. I want to talk about how to get the most out of it, but that's where most people go wrong. It's just the discipline of sitting down and reading it, having a schedule, open the Bible every day, and learning from it. So yeah, let me just start with a couple of general notes, and I'm going to start a timer here just so I don't talk forever. I ain't going to take that long. But, we all know that growth is a work of the Holy Spirit, but it's not a guarantee. You know what I mean? Like just because we get older doesn't mean we grow. We just might get older. Just getting older doesn't mean we get wiser. It doesn't mean we get more mature. Being a Christian for longer doesn't mean that we're growing. And I think for us, it's crucial that we're studying the Word. And y'all know that it's crucial that we study the Word or else you wouldn't be here on a Wednesday night talking about how to get the most out of Bible study. But, for most of us, we go wrong with the actual practical, when am I going to study the Bible? How am I going to plan it out? What am I going to study? And so I want to give just some general tips right from the onset where people go wrong. Most folks know studying the Bible is crucial. If I had a bow your head, close your eyes, does everybody know it is crucial for your fight against sin to study the Word? Everybody would be like, absolutely. If I said it, does everybody know it's crucial for your walk with Christ, for you being able to share the gospel, for you being able to encourage folks? You know it's crucial that you study the Word for that. Everybody in here would be like, yes, it's crucial that we study the Word. But if you look at it, there's been studies done on people who attend church a minimum of once a week, and it's less than 5% of people that attend church once a week are studying the Bible more than 3 times a week. You know what I'm saying? So like it's really rare. Everybody in here would say, yes, we should study the Bible, but statistically, less than 5% of us are breaking open the Word more than twice a week. And so it's convicting, but I think that's where most of us don't study, and I wanted to look into why. And I think there are some aspects where some people have roadblocks on, I don't study the Bible because it's too complex. It's just hard to understand. And for a lot of people, that is a roadblock. You know, if you're thinking about, you know, I'm jumping into a 2,000-year-old story in a culture I don't understand. It was written in a language I didn't understand. You know, like a lot of us can think it's really complex. But on the flip side, you know, you guys that are younger on the front row, y'all know y'all can open the Word at any time and get things out of it. You might not understand everything that's written in it, but you can open the Word and get things out of it. You don't have to have gone to college for the Bible to be able to get stuff out of it. You can open the Word as a kid and really grow from it. So I think the Bible's too complex. That's why I don't study it. It's kind of a smokescreen a lot of times, right? I think the other thing where people will say it's too complex, or they'll say it's too boring. I don't study the Bible because it's just too boring. I open it and I'm just like, I get it. It's just, you know? And I think the reason that the Bible is complex or boring to us is because we study really badly. We read the Bible unlike we read any book ever. What other book do we do this to? Right here. You know what I mean? You take any of those books on that table right there and try to do that, you're going to be confused and bored by that. You know what I'm saying? Our 2 biggest complaints might be because we're studying like idiots a lot of times. You know what I mean? And so we blame the Bible for our poor planning. So I just want to give a few tips on planning to study well, because this is where I go wrong. The planning to study well. So I want to think about 3 points for planning. The first one is you got to plan out when you're going to study. This may seem elementary, but for real, this is where everybody goes wrong. You know, you got to plan out when are you going to study. Are you a morning person? Are you an evening person? Do you have kids? Are you at that age? Are they going to interrupt you? Do you have things going on? Like, when are you going to study? This is where most people go wrong. Everybody knows it's super important, but I don't do it because I don't plan to do it. What's that quote? The failing to plan is planning to fail. That's it. On here, failing to plan is planning to fail. If you're not planning out when you're going to study, you're going to fail. Second point, you got to plan out where you're going to study. Obviously, you know, for y'all, I would say have a designated time and have a designated place where you study the Bible. This may seem like child's play, but this is where people go wrong. It's not with understanding the complexities of the Levitical da-da-da-da-da. It's, am I going to sit on the couch? Am I going to wake up early? Do I have an alarm set? Do I have a plan? Do I have coffee made already? That's where people go wrong in studying the Bible. All right. Third point is you got to plan out where, you got to plan out when, and what do you think the third one is? What you gonna read? Because you can't do the flip method. You know what I mean? If you do that, you're going to be really confused, because you're going to jump over here one night and you're going to be reading about Absalom's conspiracy, and then the next night you're going to jump over here and reading about Jesus healing 2 blind men. And the next night you're going to come over here somewhere in the middle and be like, nah, not that. You know, like you're going to jump somewhere in the, you know, Levitical something or other, Numbers, Leviticus, you're going to be like, not tonight. And you're going to flip somewhere nice. And usually for a lot of us, if we don't plan where we're going to study, we end up somewhere in the middle, like, I don't know, Psalms-ish. And we'll pick a nice medium length psalm, nothing too long because I don't want to go crazy tonight, but nothing too short because I'm more spiritual than that. So we pick a medium length song and then we'll read it, we'll skim it and be like, ooh, that's too brutal. I want something happy before I go to bed. And we'll read a medium length psalm that's a happy psalm, and we'll go to bed. And if somebody were to say, all right, tell me what you read. Tell me what you got out of it. How did you get closer to the Lord? We'd be like, I checked the box. I don't know. I don't know what I read. I think we're not maximizing Bible study because we're studying so badly. We don't plan out the when, we don't plan out the where, we don't plan out the what. And so what happens is a lot of times we find ourselves skimming and summarizing, all right? We'll skim a verse and we'll summarize it because we're not even sure what pace to read at. You know, we're like, do I take a chapter? Do I take a verse? Do I take 2 chapters? So what we end up doing is skimming and summarizing, and we're going too fast where we should go slow and going too slow where we should go fast sometimes. And so I think like this verse here, therefore, my beloved, as you've always obeyed, so now not only is in my presence, but much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, for it's God who works in you, both to will and to work for his good pleasure. What'd y'all get out of that? Jack squat. We get nothing out of that. You know why? We read it too fast. But that's the pace we'll read at a lot of times casually, where we don't know how to pace things in Bible study. So we'll fly through a passage and just be like, all right, what did he just say? He said something about working out your salvation. I don't know what that was, but I think he's saying do good stuff. Like we'll skim and summarize, we'll totally get the wrong message. So I want to come back to that in just a second, all right? Because in reality, there's no passage in the Bible that tells us exactly how to study, which is weird to think about. The best way to learn how to study is by studying. You get better at studying the Bible by studying the Bible. Let me give you a quote, and then I'm going to give you 5 tips, and then we'll open up, all right? So this quote helps me a lot when I'm thinking about pace, when I'm thinking about studying the Bible. It comes from a guy named David Mathis. He's comparing raking and digging in reading the Bible. There's a place for raking in Bible reading, gathering up the leaves at a swift pace. But when we dig in Bible study, we unearth the diamonds. And then in meditation, we marvel at the jewels. I love this quote. There's a place for raking in the Bible reading, gathering in at a swift pace. But there's also a place but when we dig in Bible study, we unearth the diamonds. And then in meditation, we marvel at the jewels. All right, so I want to give 5 tips out of this quote on studying the Bible to just maximize it, all right? And again, these may seem elementary, but it really helps us out. The first big thing is you got to plan it out, plan the when, the where, the what, all right? What should you study, when, where, what? And let me just say on the what, I didn't cover this, but on the what, if you're wondering where should I study, how should I start, let me just say instead of the popcorn method, pick one book of the Bible and stay there. Start at the start and end at the end. And to be honest, it doesn't really matter what book you study, although some can help you out more than others, you know? So if you're a rookie, and most of y'all in the room are not rookies at studying the Bible, but if you're new, like you young ones, if you've never really studied the Bible and had a good habit of it, I'd say start with one of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Start with one of those, and then basically, let's say today you start in John 1, and we'll talk about how fast should you go. But start in John 1. If you open up the Bible every morning, start in John 1, you read what it says, you really think about it, and you write it down in a notebook. Then the next morning, you pick up where you left off. Let's say you did 4 verses yesterday. The next morning, you start at verse 5. And you pick it up, write what you learned. Then the next morning, you pick up where you left off. Work your way all the way through the book till you finish John, and then you get to study something else. Get to pick a new book. Does that make sense? Just start at the start and end at the end. Because if you just jump in halfway, I mean, what movie do you watch starting in the middle? None of them, right? So start at the start and end at the end. So, okay, let me give the 5 tips out of this quote, and then we'll move on. All right, so the first one is this. Sometimes when you're studying the Bible, you got to rake the leaves. What do I mean by this? Sometimes you're covering large portions of Scripture. And this is primarily when you're talking about narrative. Like some passages, when you think about the action of raking in the leaves, you know, if you had to, up here back home, I grew up in Columbus, Georgia, we never raked leaves. But, you know, it's all pine straw down there. But here you got to rake the leaves, right? It's not a hard job. It doesn't take long, and you can cover a ton of ground quickly. What I'm saying is, all right, sometimes in the mornings, let's say you're picking a morning, and I would recommend the mornings for most folks because that's the time you know you're not going to be interrupted. That's the time you know you're not going to have anything else scheduled. If you try to have a lunch thing, you know, lunch changes every day. Try to do a supper, you know, around supper time afternoon. Now, maybe you're a homeschool mom or something, and you've got a guaranteed 3 o'clock slot every day, something like that. All right, great. but pick a time that you know you're going to be able to do it. All right, but raking the leaves, sometimes because of time constraints or sometimes because of the content, you can cover a lot of ground quickly. All right, so if you're reading a narrative on David's life, David and Goliath, you can cover a lot of ground pretty quick. You might be able to cover a chapter in a day, and really retain what it's saying, understanding what it's saying. You know what I mean? Sometimes because of time constraints, you might move more quickly rather than slowly through a passage, all right? So sometimes you're raking in the leaves. You don't need to, if it says, and David walked up the hill, you don't need to be like, what does it mean walked? Like David walked up the hill, let's go. Sometimes you're raking in the leaves. The second one, that's covering large portions of Scripture. You need to do this often. Not too much depth, all right? Sometimes you got to dig, all right? Sometimes what I mean is because of the time you get or because of the passage, you might need to go deeper into one spot, right? So let's think back on this verse that we had earlier, all right? Therefore, my beloved, as you've always obeyed, so now not only is in my presence, but much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. For it's God who works in you, both to will and to work for his good pleasure. Pause for a second. Is this a raking verse or a digging verse? Digging. This ain't David walked up the hill. You can't move at a swift pace here and gather up the leaves. Sometimes you're raking in leaves, sometimes you're digging, which means you're in one spot and you're going deep right here. You might only hit one verse this morning. You might only hit 2 verses this morning. You need to go at a pace of understanding. You know what I'm saying? So if you're in a passage where you can move fast, go at a pace of understanding. If you're in a passage where you don't understand it, you've got to slow down. So if we're thinking about slowing down and digging in this passage, we would say, let's just break it down. Therefore, in light of what he's already said, my beloved, he's writing to brothers, he's writing to Christians, those that he loves, as you've always obeyed. So he's writing to faithful believers. So now, not only is in my presence, but much more in my absence. So even more now that I'm gone from you guys, I spent time with you guys, and now that I'm gone, he says, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. That part of the verse makes us super nervous. Because anytime you have work and salvation in the same sentence, you're like, what is he saying? Well, he explains it right here. Because you work, because God is working in you. Both to will, that's to want to do, and to work, that's to do, according to his good pleasure. Basically, it's what it's saying is, you work because God's working in you to make you want and do what he wants you to do. You know what I'm saying? This, just taking 30 seconds, I mean, we literally took a minute maybe. Just taking a minute and digging in one spot, you get a lot more than that fly-by reading. You know what I'm saying? But here's where, y'all know, so I had to dig probably a fence fell down in the wind a couple of days ago or whatever. And so I had to dig some new, fence posts, put in some new posts. And so y'all know digging around here, you hit that creek rock right quick, and it's just a pain in the butt. And so you got to, a lot of times, you might have, your post hole diggers, but then you also have some different tools. You might need a digger bar. Y'all seen one of those, the weighted big bar that you got to get in there and, break the rocks apart. We had post hole diggers. We had a digger bar. We had shovels. It was me and Jed out there and Amy. And so we're out there getting after it, but we're digging deep in one spot, but it was so tricky that we had to get different tools. You get what I'm saying? Sometimes you come up on a verse like this in Philippians, again, just 4 verses later, and it says this, even if I am to be poured out as a drink offering upon the sacrificial offering of your faith, I'm glad and rejoice with y'all. What is that? What's a drink offering? Because when I read it for the first time, I was like, I got no clue what that is. This is where you need a different tool. All right, we're digging in one spot. That's not a raking verse, it's a digging verse. So sometimes you can get it just by reading through and thinking on it, but sometimes you need a different tool. And here's where I'd recommend to you guys, you don't have to spend a lot of money, but sometimes different tools can help you out when no amount of meditation is going to bring you this answer. Drink offering, you just don't know what it is. You know what I mean? And so no amount of you're not going to get it. And so we need to have some super nerds who've done the work and know the original culture and language that can help us understand it. So let me give you two different tools, and there's a lot. All right. So this, I'll start with this one. So this is a commentary. It's easy to get overwhelmed when you start thinking about Bible study because there's a billion different books. You got, your Bible atlas and your Bible dictionary. You got commentaries. You got all this different stuff, and it's easy to just be like, oh, heck no, I have no clue. A commentary makes comments on the Bible. And so this commentary is on Ecclesiastes because that's what I'm preaching on Sunday. And so basically you can see it's a lot thicker than the book of Ecclesiastes. So what it does is it takes the verse and then it does just what I'm telling you guys to do. It takes the verse and then it writes out all the thoughts on it. And then it goes to the next verse and writes out all the thoughts on it. It's just comments. And it's really helpful. It's not intimidating. It's just a guy who's writing out, who understands the original language, who understands the culture, and is able to write out, all right, here's what a drink offering actually means. Here's what Paul's saying in the context. Just like they used to use a drink offering like this, here's what Paul's saying here. You know what I mean? So a commentary can be really helpful. If you don't have a lot of money, a lot of these commentaries, and we can recommend to you some easy, medium, hard on the commentaries. We can recommend some different series because some of them are more entry levels, more pastoral, and some of them are like, I read that sentence 4 times and I have no clue what it's saying. So we can recommend to you kind of easy, medium, hard. But if you don't want to sink money for each book of the Bible you're studying, I'd recommend a study Bible. All right. A study Bible is like a miniature version of the commentaries. So you can see, so this is Jed's Bible. It's so cool. So Jed's 13. And he asked me, this is probably 3 or 4 months ago. He's like, hey, I need a better Bible. I need a study Bible. He really wants to dig in. So I was like, yes, I'll buy you whatever Bible you want. So we went on. It was like 10 or 11 at night. I was like, that night, we're going to order it right now. Tell me exactly. So this is exactly what he wanted. He wanted this cover. He wanted this, layout. But a study Bible, you can see is thicker than my normal Bible, and you don't have to worry about the thickness or whatever. So it makes comments, but it's not as much as that. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, it's got some comments, it's got some maps, it's got some helpful things at the bottom of the page, and it'll get you down the road, but it's not going to be as in-depth as that. So this is just another tool in the toolbox. You know what I'm saying? So sometimes you're raking in the leaves, you can move really quickly, depending on maybe your time that morning, maybe on the content of those verses. Sometimes you're digging, and as you're digging, you sometimes are going to need a different sort of tool. All right. I told you there's 5 tips. Sometimes you're raking in the leaves. Sometimes you got to dig. Third one's meditate. Meditate. This is not something weird, but all I'm saying is you can't just read and get the information. When you're reading the Bible, we all know it's not about information transfer. I'm not just trying to transfer information from that page to my head. I want to connect with the Lord. I want to become more like Jesus. I want to meet with God in my living room. And so meditation is what brings it all alive. If you look, the closest we get to a passage that tells us how to study the Bible is this one, is in Joshua chapter 1. This is where Joshua is about to pull his sword and go fight 31 kings across the river, all right? And God gives to this military leader really specific instructions about the Bible, all right? Look at what he says. Be strong and very courageous. Listen to what he says about the word. Being careful to do according to all the law that Moses, my servant, commanded you. Don't turn from it from the right to the right or to the left, that you may have good success wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do, there it is again, according to all that's written in it. Then you'll make your way prosperous. Then you'll have good success. He kind of gives a template for reading and studying the Bible. And it's really, if you think about it, it's really obey, speak, meditate, obey. He gives them 5 points here, but the one I want to focus on here is meditate. The scripture is crucial. It says, be careful to do according to the law, but it says meditate on it day and night. What does it mean, meditate? Meditate is just really chew on it. Repeat it. Chew on it. I read this quote from Thomas Watson. The reason we come away so cold from reading the word is because we don't warm ourselves at the fires of meditation. I like that. We'll read the word, and sometimes y'all have done that, where you read the word and you just kind of close it and you're just like, eh. But man, sometimes you have to meditate on it during the day. You have to, and what I do for this, and you guys that are younger, this is a funny tip, but a lot of times I'll take a pen and write just like a word on my hand, or I'll write a couple letters on my hand so that every time I raise that hand, I think about it during the day, just something that I've studied. Or I might put like a note card in my back pocket, so every time I sit down, it's like crinkle, crinkle. Then I'm like, what the heck? And I pull it out and I'm like, oh, and I read the verse again. Just whatever I have to do to meditate on it, to stop and think on it. But I'm going to tell you, the biggest enemy to meditation on the scriptures right here. You know what I mean? A lot of times when we come home at night, we should be slowing down and we're speeding up. We're thinking we're relaxing, but we're actually just filling our minds with fluff. And so I would say you're going to have to say no to something to say yes to Bible study. You have to say no to something to say yes to meditation time. And often it's just empty entertainment on our phone. But I'll read to you. No, I don't have this verse on the screen, but I'll read to you Psalms 1. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, or stands in the way of sinners, or sits in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted by streams of water that yields its fruit in its season. Its leaf doesn't wither, and all he does he prospers. The wicked are not so, but are like the chaff the wind drives away. If you want to be strong in the Lord, you meditate day and night. Meditate on the word. The last one is this. The fourth one, sorry. Fourth one's obey. So we said sometimes you're raking the leaves, sometimes you're digging, going deeper in a book, but whether you're raking or you're digging, you got to meditate, right? That meditate point, whether you're raking and you're thinking about David walking up a hill and fighting against Goliath, you still got to meditate on that. If you're digging and you're deep in one spot, you still got to meditate on that. But whether you're digging or you're raking, you're meditating and obey. This is the piece that I miss so often, where I'm like, oh, I understood that. So, did I obey it? That's the real deal. You know what I mean? The Lord does not care if I understand a verse that I don't obey. So, be doers of the word, not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. All right? Remember that template for Joshua was obey, speak, meditate, obey. If God values the word this much, so should we. If God values obedience that much, so should we. And the last one I'd say as you're studying the Bible is just to find Jesus. Wherever you're at in the scripture, find Jesus. What I mean is like, not like a Where's Waldo, where you're like, well, how does this match up with Jesus? Because you can find Jesus in a superficial way in some of these passages. Like for Red Oak in 2014, I taught on that passage in Exodus where Moses is fighting that army at Rephidim, and as long as he keeps his hands up, like the army wins, and as soon as his hand sinks, the army loses. And I'm studying that, and it's easy to go superficial here and be like, where do I find Jesus in this passage? Well, the superficial way would be, Moses equals Jesus. Moses was on a hill, Jesus was on a hill. Moses had his arms raised, Jesus had his arms raised. Moses was surrounded by his two friends, and Jesus was surrounded by two, well, not really friends, but, Moses had the armies out in front of him, the 12 tribes in front of him, and Jesus had the 12 disciples in front. Well, not at this point, but, if we try to do this weird connect the dot games, it does not benefit us at all. We need to look deeper to find Jesus. And what we see in that passage with Moses is, Moses ain't strong enough to deliver us. We need someone stronger. We need Jesus. That's how we find Jesus, just in that passage. So find Jesus no matter what we're studying. How does this fit into the context? Because a lot of times I'm guilty of reading this story and skipping straight to me. How does this apply to me? What's this mean for me? Think about what it meant originally, and then think about what it says about God, and then see how it applies to me personally. I'll get to this verse in just a second, but a lot of times, just thinking of that last quote, a lot of times we want application. What do I do with this? But first comes interpretation. What does this mean? All right, that's a lot of nerdy stuff, but let me just get back to this. We get to meet with the Lord, and it's such a privilege that we meet with the Creator. And I'll tell you, the goal is to connect with the Lord. And some mornings it's going to feel awesome. And some mornings it's going to feel like brushing your teeth. And there's nothing sinful about that. You know what I mean? Like some mornings you're going to open the word and it's just going to blow you away. And you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I never knew that. And the next morning, same time, same place, same book of the Bible, you're going to open it up and read it and be like, all right, moving along. And it's all right. You're being faithful that day. You're being obedient. The Lord's building that, and he may reveal, like himself to you later on in the day or whatever. You're just being faithful. Don't worry about relying on emotions. If I didn't feel it today, I must have done something wrong. Our emotions change with the song that's on the radio. So don't rely on on your emotions. Don't. A couple other things I would say is, don't feel like a failure if you miss a day. Everybody sleeps in. Everybody misses a day. Just get in the habit. Stay in the habit of reading the word. Don't feel this isn't works-based acceptance with God. All right. I'll read this, and then I'll give one last story, and then I want to open it up. I love this verse because it's really, it says, and this is talking about Moses. Y'all remember when Moses went up on the mountain and he had the veil over his face? It's talking about that. It says, and we all with unveiled face now, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. This comes from the Lord who is the Spirit. I love this verse in the context of studying the Word. If you meet with the Lord daily, he's going to grow you. If you're a believer and you're just open and cracking the Word, maybe you're hitting Luke 3 this morning. If you're cracking the Word, he's going to do the growth little by little by little because we're beholding the Lord. Because look at what it says. We all, beholding the glory of the Lord, looking at the Lord, looking at Jesus. We're being changed. We're being transformed into that same image. We're being changed to look like Jesus. And I think the message is, the more you look at Jesus, the more you look like Jesus. We're being transformed into that same image this much today, and then this much tomorrow, by one degree of glory to another. And you're not doing it, the Lord's doing it. But we get to participate in it by being faithful today to set our alarm clock, to have that spot on the couch, to have the coffee pre-made, to have our book set out, to have our notebooks ready to go. We get to participate in that miracle of the more we look at Jesus, the more we look like Jesus. All right. So I'll give the last story, and I love this one just in the context of last thought in the last story, and then we'll open it up. But Bible study is very personalized. I thought about opening up like my notes on my Bible study and just kind of going through and like, all right, here's the tips and tricks of what I do. It's so personalized. I think if we get the template down of like, all right, I got to think about the where, the when, the what. I've got to, I got to know kind of what pace I'm going at, the pace of understanding. Sometimes I'm raking, sometimes I'm digging. I might need a study tool, but whatever I'm doing, I'm meditating. I'm really trying to obey. I'm trying to see Jesus. But y'all, the best way to get better at studying the Bible is studying the Bible. I think about it like, y'all know how to ride bikes? Everybody? Berkeley, you know how to ride a bike? How'd you learn how to ride a bike? Did you read a book? Did you read a book? Is that how you learn how to ride a bike? No? Did y'all watch a bunch of YouTube videos? Did your parents hire some experts so that you know how to ride a bike? How you learn how to ride a bike? You get on it. You ride a bike, right? And how you get better at it? Just keep riding it. It's the same way with Bible study. You don't need an expert to teach you. You don't need a big class. All you need to do is read the Bible, and you're going to get better at it. You're going to gain momentum. But the thing is, you got to say no to other things. I'll read this last verse, and then we can think, and we can go deeper into whatever aspect you want. But the last verse is this. Luke 10. Just think about this for a second. Think in the context of we get to meet with the Lord in the living room. Right? We get to meet with the Lord in our houses. Luke 10. As they went on their way, Jesus entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his teaching. Martha was distracted with much serving. And she went up to him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve all alone? Tell her to help me. Pause for a second. We understand the situation? Jesus is traveling around. He comes to this house. Martha is like, It's go time. The Lord's here. Are the vacuum lines in the rug? Is the fried chicken ready to go? Is the candle lit? Does the house smell good? Do we take the trash out? Let's go. We got to get this place prepped. It is Jesus. It's Jesus in our house. We got to go. And every time she passes by the living room, she sees Mary just talking to Jesus, just sitting there, listening to Jesus' stories. And she probably wanted to hear the stories. She probably like, hey, just pause on that story though. All right, I got to wipe down these counters, all right? And then next time she comes by and she's like, hey, Mary, you want to get in here? Like just kind of passive aggressive. And she's like, I got to fry this chicken over here. And like, hey, Jesus, that sounds great. Just pause for a second. And finally she gets frustrated and goes to Jesus and says, hey, tell her to help me. Look what Jesus said. Martha, you're anxious and troubled about many things, but one thing is necessary. Mary's chosen the good thing. Make your mornings about one thing. That's it. You can get into a lot of mess tomorrow morning. I can get into a lot of distraction on my phone. I can look at the Apple News stories. I can catch up on what's going on Instagram or Facebook. I can just do some nonsense. One thing's necessary. There's only one thing necessary. And if we meet with Jesus, we get to meet with the Creator in our living room. Oh, that is such a privilege. And we can get all kind of tips and tricks, but the reality is, Mary's just sitting listening. She's just disciplined to stop, recognize what's important, and sit and listen to Jesus. If we do that every day, we're going to grow. If you open the Word, pick a book of the Bible, have a consistent time, write down what you learned, you're going to grow. We're going to get better at Bible study. All right. Any thoughts on Bible study? Let's get some. I've been talking for a long time, 10 minutes longer than I'd planned to. So I'd like to hear. Obviously, it's very personalized, and I'll give you just a template, and if anybody wants to chime in on what they do, what I do, I am a night person. I love studying at night. Tonight, my plan is when the kids are here until 8:30, and then we'll all get home. We'll get home about 9 o'clock, 9:30 or so. The kids will start going to bed. Our bedtime is 9 to 9:30 for the kids. And then me and Amy usually go to bed we work at camp. So it's usually like in between 11 and 12, we go to bed. And so I'm best at night. And so tonight I plan on sitting at my desk and studying. That's when I go deep. That's when I go dig a hole deep. In the mornings, my brain is mush. I know it's important to set the tone for my day with the Word, and so I rake in the mornings. In the mornings, I'll pick me a passage, and I'll rake me some leaves. And I'll tell you this, if I don't have time for a full meal, I'll get a snack. I'll listen to the Word in the shower. If I need to, I'll just get a snack if I don't have time for a full meal that day. But that's my go-to. As I dig in the evenings, I rake in the mornings, and it works for me. It sets the tone for the day, but in the mornings, I can't 2.5 cups. That's all I can drink in the morning, and I can't get my brain going hard in the mornings, and so I have to study at night. That's my template. Now, I pick up the book of the Bible. I do it on the computer. I have commentaries open, but I write down stuff on the computer instead of a notebook just because it's easier for me to type than write. I can type faster. For me, I take breaks in the middle of my study time so I can meditate. So in the middle of studying, I'll pause and go outside. If I'm studying for a sermon or something, I'll go on a run. I'll do whatever so I can take meditation breaks during the study. Sometimes I'll just do a walk and pray. I used to study in this parking lot, and I'd study for 20, 30 minutes, and I'd walk and pray. Some mornings you got a lot of time. Some mornings you don't have a lot of time. And so again, if I can't eat a full meal, I'll get a snack. What about y'all? What do you do? What works for you? Anybody want to share kind of something they figured out about themselves? And the reason I'm asking you to share is somebody else might have your personality, your disposition. It might be like, I don't know what he's talking about, but that sounds more like me. You know what I'm saying? So, Muggs, what works for you? Or Kara, yeah. You raised your hand.
I did raise my hand.
This is thus saith Spencer, not thus saith the Lord. I don't understand to me, I don't put a lot of value on reading through the Bible in a year if I didn't get anything. If I didn't really, for me, I tried that for a while, and I found the same thing. I'm like, I am flying over verses I should be digging in. And so I will still rake in the mornings, but I don't feel a pressure to rake in digging verses and just try to snag a nugget along the way, out the window as I'm driving by kind of thing. So I kind of gave up on the reading through the Bible just because it wasn't doing it for me. I was like, so what? I get to the end of this year and I say to nobody, really, I finished the Bible in a year. I understood not much, to me, that's why I abandoned it. Now, somebody else may speak up and say, I got a lot of value on the macro zoom out and look at the story of Scripture from flying through the Bible. And I didn't get as deep, but I dug deep in different places. I think you can do it in a way that's valuable. For me, I didn't connect with it in that way. I got frustrated. It's kind of like when I was in seminary, they gave us all these books to read and so little time to read them. And I'd be like, well, I'd love to read this book when I can slow down and understand it. But as for now, eyes got to touch the words, and I was just like, what am I doing? And so I set aside the ones I wanted to read later, and I felt like I was doing the same thing with the year through the Bible. Anybody have a different experience with that?
I guess it's through a commentary.
A lot of it is, yeah. So like it can be. I know I've felt intimidated at times. I'm not saying you're feeling intimidated, but like I've felt intimidated at times. Like, but I've felt intimidated in reading a verse and hearing someone speak on it and being like, I totally didn't get any of that, or just being like, well, I thought about this deep and he's going down here and I don't. Well, to be honest, when I'm standing up on Sunday, a couple days from now, y'all might have read the verse for 20 minutes, and that's awesome. And that's what I do if I'm not preaching. I read the verse and prep my mind for it. But if I'm preaching, I'm spending 20 hours, and it's 20 hours, a long time. And so I'm on my fourth and fifth commentary, just trying to dig in. So I'm way more familiar, and trying to take that and putting it into 25 minutes. So it may seem like, how did he get all that out of there? But you would too if you spent 20 hours on it. Anybody would. And so it's just that digging. All it is taking, when we talk about exposition, you're digging, you're doing the hard work of exegetical study, like digging deep. And then you're trying to figure out, how can I say this in the way that it's going to connect with people in 25 minutes? How can I take this 20 hours and say it in a way that's going to connect with folks in 20 minutes? And that's where, if you're sitting here and you're listening to Brody or listening to Joseph or somebody at speak, you're like, oh, I totally didn't get that. But 20 hours, you totally would, Yeah. I love the paraphrasing. I did that with the work out your own salvation. I kind of put that in I love doing that as a way to understand it. And that's a good point on having like if you like having a template, maybe and we could recommend some resources that, are, because you can find wacky resources and you can find solid resources and of, again, all different levels. But if you're the kind of person that loves like, hey man, study questions would help me out a ton. Some people are like, dude, that accelerated my growth like no other. And some people are like, I do not like that at all. It's very personalized. But if you're that sort of person, yeah, like don't be afraid of study helps like that can kind of guide you along. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I like that. I've done that before, especially in like Proverbs or something that's, you kind of got water verses and wine verses. You got to slow down and savor some. So writing it over and over and over sometimes helps you like, okay, all right. I like that. All right, so just think for a second at how personalized this is. Because we've heard, what helps me is to study in the mornings. And I'm trying to decide if I like studying the Bible in a year or not. Well, what helps me as I'm studying the Bible quickly is if I'm raking, I need to write down one big thought and meditate on that during the day. What helps me is to pray before I come to prep my heart with the Lord. What helps me is I like having external questions that help me to go deeper. Well, I like writing in my Bible so I can remember it. I like taking something I've learned in a sermon and going back and studying on it. I like writing things out and like highlighting the verses that I like. I like writing things over and over. There's tons and tons of tips. You got to figure out what works for you. And if we're meeting with the Lord, making our mornings about one thing, there's a lot of things we can get anxious about, but if we make them one thing mornings, meet with the Lord, He's going to grow us. And I'm going to encourage you guys to just continue we're kind of out of time, but continue among yourselves, just kind of sharing tips and like, hey, what'd you think about? Because like for us, y'all are sharing things that might click with each other in a big way, stuff that I would never bring up because they don't work for me, and it's great solutions to y'all are answering solutions to each other's, and that's the way the body's supposed to do. And so I encourage y'all to continue the conversation on, and that's an easy entry level spiritual question. What do you do for Bible study? Great. Now you're in. Do you understand it that way? Does that connect with you? That's a great entry level to spiritual conversation. So, thanks for coming. Yeah, Joseph.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Oh, hang on, Bo had a.
Kick back on some slides.
Oh yeah,
I'm gonna
I can. Yeah, we'll email them.